Hello, everybody. Welcome to Voices of Impact, where people's voices are being heard loud and clear all around the world to make the greatest impact that you can. I'm excited for our next guest. His name is Gordon Firemark. And Gordon, I'm actually going to hand over the mic to you and let you introduce yourself.
Well, hi, Michelle. Thank you so much for having me and for the opportunity to share with your audience. As you said, my name is Gordon Firemark. I am a lawyer by training and an entertainer and, well, entertainment guy, not an entertainer myself, but I love to work with folks in the fields of entertainment. In fact, in the podcasting space, I am really kind of known as the podcast lawyer. I was sort
Yeah,
of
and I'm
first,
I'm so excited to dive into that one because
yeah.
we briefly spoke, like very minimal, before we
Mhm.
started recording. So I'm getting to learn about you just like my audience is getting to
Awesome.
learn about you. So you being a podcast lawyer, right?
Not the podcast lawyer.
I like that. A
That's
podcast
the
lawyer.
brand.
So what does that mean? So what types of adversities are you seeing podcasters face in this new day and age? And then how do you
Yeah.
help them?
Well, the background that I come with, podcasting isn't that old of an industry. It's about 20 years old. So I came from practicing a broader entertainment law, and I still do work in film and theater and television and those areas. And what we deal with in the field of entertainment law and podcast law are things like copyrights, contract relationships, trademarks and branding kinds of things, people choosing titles of shows that conflict with somebody else's title, and then you have a dispute about that or disagreement. So how to protect yourself. And I'm more of a transactional lawyer rather than a litigator. So I view what I do as really to help creative people achieve their impact and influence, get their message out, and do it all without legal trouble, without getting in lawsuits or disputes and disagreements and things.
Got it. So this is interesting because I run a nonprofit called
Hmm.
Unsilenced Voices. We help survivors of domestic violence, sexual abuse, and trafficking worldwide. And I remember going through the trademark process just for our logo, right?
Hmm.
Unsilenced Voices, the logo and the name, and it was a process for sure. How important do you think it is to trademark names and brands in order to have the greatest impact?
I think it is very important. I would say maybe not very top of the list. I think that getting your business structures and your relationships within your producing group, your team, those kinds of things, that's more important because that's where ownership resides. But the trademark, the brand that you create is something you're investing in on a weekly or monthly basis and really putting a lot of your resources into. And so you want to protect it and make sure that nobody else comes along and names their show Voices of Impact or Voices of Impact with Johnny or something like that. It's still going to be confusing. So we're trying to protect your ability to put a stop to those kinds of things if it comes to that.
So, Gordon, I just have some questions because I'm unfamiliar with all of
Of
this.
course.
Um, there's books out there with the same title, right? With the authors being different names, but there's books with the same title. Now, I know there's podcasts out there with the same title as well.
Mm,
So, if you don't copyright, if you don't trademark your name,
yeah.
what are the likelihoods that you're actually going to come into conflict with this other podcaster, for example, that has the same name as your podcast?
Great question. And I'm sorry for the answer I'm about to give you, but the fact of it is, there are some common law rights regarding adoption of a brand name as well. And so, and a title for a podcast is effectively a brand name. Now, you're not in the same class of goods and services as books, and the trademark law is kind of a strange beast, and they don't let you register a title for a single work, like a film or a book or something, until you've got a series or a line of product, right? So
Then some.
yeah, so something like Harry Potter and or the Idiot's Guide to or those kinds of things can be registered, so we always know what we're getting when we buy it. It's about consumer protection, really. So the real question that we end up getting into, if there's a disagreement or dispute, is there some likelihood that there's going to be confusion, that people go looking for show A and they find something from the other person, the other creator, and it somehow either well confuses the audience or reflects badly on, one is good and one is bad, and so it reflects badly on the good one. Those kinds of things. So, unfortunately, my advice to folks that are starting a show is do a search first, and if there's already shows in there with that title, you know, probably want to change it up unless you're sure that they've already stopped doing their show. If they've abandoned it, if those kinds of things, then you're a little clearer. But yeah, well,
Yeah.
unfortunately. So I'm going to say, Michelle, and we'll talk about it after.
Yeah. I totally know what you're gonna say, but I'm glad you're gonna save that for after we're
Yeah,
recording. No, we have a Voices of Impact mastermind.
yeah,
Unsilenced Voices is the nonprofit,
yeah.
and I speak about telling your story.
And,
So
and the way trademark works is it really is a sort of first to market with the product or the service kind of wins. And since you've already been in the spaces with products and services in the same arena,
yeah,
it's likely that you're okay. But this is something you probably need to analyze.
yeah, definitely need to analyze that. So enough about me. It's more about the audience,
All
right?
right.
So Gordon, what propelled you to be the podcast lawyer? Like, why are you in podcasts? Tell us a little bit about who you are.
So as I said, I've been practicing entertainment law for a little over 32 years now. And when I started out on my own, which is 31 years ago, I was looking for how do you market. They don't teach you how to sell and market in law school. They teach you how to think like a lawyer. So I went and I had to really figure out approaches to marketing my practice as a lawyer. And I started out by doing a hard printed newsletter that I sent. I remember sitting in my office licking stamps and putting them on newsletters that were going out, and then eventually figured out bulk mail and those kinds of things. Then along came the internet, and I put up a blog site. Before the term blog was coined, I created this website that was backed by a database and all that. Anyway, and that, and then I started just pointing people to that. Well, writing a weekly blog post got to be a bit of a chore. And then I was also sending that out by email when email became easier. And then I've always been a geek, a sound guy and stuff like that before I went to law school. And I discovered this TV host that I was following, a guy named Leo Laporte, who's very famous in the podcasting world. When the TV show that he was on, the cable channel he was on was called Tech TV, they changed everything and switched formats to a video game channel. And so his show was done. So he started up an audio version of his show as a podcast. This is very early on, probably 2005, 2006. And I followed it over and I started listening. And back then, to listen to a podcast, you had to download a file and move it over onto your iPod and then, sync your iPod, all that kind of stuff.
I do remember those days, by the way.
Yeah, well, maybe the listeners. Anyway, so um, I discovered it as a listener, and then I got invited to be a guest on someone else's show talking about video and the law for wedding photographers and videographers and folks like that. And that became a recurring every couple of weeks kind of a thing. And pretty soon it was its own show called the Law and Video Podcast. And it was this other podcaster interviewing me with questions.
Mhm.
And we did that for maybe a year before his bosses at his regular job accused him of moonlighting and made him stop. But by then I had been caught, hooked on the thing. I had the bug and I wanted to do it. So around late 2008, my wife and I had a baby and we went through some stuff. But during the paternity leave time, I decided, okay, I'm going to start this podcast. I found a co-host and we started up Entertainment Law Update, and that sort of took the place of that weekly blog post part that I wasn't enjoying. And it's easier to just talk into a microphone, be yourself, and share some ideas and thoughts. So, Entertainment Law Update became a thing in 2009, and here we are, 16 years later, going strong. So,
Yeah, going strong.
14,
That's
15
great.
years later.
So I have a question for those out there listening and they want to start a podcast or they have a podcast.
Yeah. Mhm.
Do you monetize your podcast, Gordon?
There's a lot. This word monetize is an interesting one because there's lots of different ways to make money from podcasting or to involve podcasting in your making money processes. And the way we've monetized, we've had sponsors over the years. And when we first started the show, we thought about, well, maybe we'll do continuing legal education credit and we'll basically sell the certificates for people who've listened. Those mechanisms didn't really work. Sponsorship, we occasionally have sponsors. It doesn't pay a lot. It sort of covers the basic costs of things. But the real advantage for us is that it positions me and my co-host as experts in our field,
Mhm,
and other listeners who are also lawyers tend to refer business to us as a result of that.
mhm.
Or you do something that's more client facing, and it becomes a way of generating awareness of your products and services. And so it's a marketing tool.
Yeah.
Now, if you've got some celebrity, some fame, and you're able to get a really big audience, I'm talking about hundreds of thousands of downloads per episode, that's where advertising supported podcasting can be a moneymaker for you, because the ad rates just don't justify it until you start to get into those big numbers.
Yeah, that is
So,
true. That's really interesting. So I remember when I first published my very first book
mhm,
called What I Love Him, which was my experience in domestic violence.
mm,
It propelled me as the expert in my space because
yeah,
I published. So having
exactly.
a podcast kind of does the same thing for you. It
Yeah.
accentuates your brand,
Hmm.
accentuates your voice, and gives you even more exposure. So when I first published that book, I was like, oh, maybe I'll make a bunch of money. That's not what happened, but the
Not
exposure
from selling books.
not from selling books, right? But the exposure that I received
Yeah.
because of being a published author, and since, at the time of this recording, we have seven books, six books published,
Hmm.
seven books published right now. So,
Yeah.
in 2025, we've got two more coming out. One is our collaboration, Breaking the Silence Voices of Survivors, Volume 3, and then Your Ultimate Breakthrough, which is my second full length book. But
Congratulations, by the way. That's really
oh, thank
remarkable.
you. Yeah, thank you. But it is interesting. I was hesitant to
Yeah.
start podcasting.
Well, I'll tell you, the neat thing about podcasting, I mean, think about it, lots of folks, professionals, thought leaders, experts have historically gone and spoken on live stages in front of audiences as a way of positioning themselves as that expert and generating awareness and so on and so forth. But, how often can you really do? I mean, some people do it every week, I guess, and professional speakers. But the nice thing about podcasting is that basically you own the stage when you do that, and you're up there every week speaking to that audience, 30, 40, 50, 100, however many, thousands of people, and they really get to know you. It's a much more intimate kind of a relationship. I mean, we're in each other's ears talking and sharing, and a podcast listener can hear the smile in your voice and get a sense for your personality, and do they like you. And everything in life, every business transaction starts with knowing, liking, and trusting the person you're doing business with. So I think it's a great way to build those components.
Yeah, and I do as well. I think that it's a fabulous way. My very good friend Angel Tussey, she runs the Nita Guest group on Facebook. She
Oh,
owns
nice.
that group. But her and I, we speak on a lot of stages together. She's a great friend of mine, and it was her idea to then propel me. Hey, you should probably have a podcast just because.
Yeah.
Now, granted, years ago when I first came out about my abusive relationship back in, oh gosh, 2016, I went live on Facebook, and I used those lives. There was 30 of them. I mean, if
Yeah.
you're listening, you can go to Tuesday Talks with Michelle Jewsbury. That's what I called it back then.
Nice.
It was just educating about domestic violence issues. But I remember going live, and I was shaking in my boots, so
Yeah.
scared to go live, and I was my hands were all clammy. But then I started to do it over and over again. And like you said, the people that continually watched or tuned in, they get to know you more. So
Yeah.
Gordon, you have this podcast, you have
Mm.
this brand of yours of being the podcast attorney, excuse me.
Yep.
And you're using your voice to help other people. You have a desire, it sounds like, to give back and encourage other individuals to, take the right steps. So, what is this next step for you in your life, Gordon?
Wow. I'm at a point in my life and career where I'm not exactly considering retirement anytime soon. I've got kids in school still, so where it's a ways off. But I'm sort of looking at ways to share my knowledge and expertise and serve that mission that you described as helping people, serving the community, and helping folks get their impact and influence out there. in ways that don't involve me having to necessarily be hands-on with a contract on the screen and you know, the direct one-to-one client service stuff. So I've created courses and lots of online resources and things like that that allow the do-it-yourself crowd to do it themselves, but with the right guidance and information and resources. And so I think that doubling down on that is really sort of my next step. And you know, getting out and speaking more and doing more podcasting. That you mentioned the one. I actually have several shows, and if you're a podcaster, my weekly live stream slash podcast is called Legit Podcast Pro, and it's find me on YouTube. That's probably the easiest way for that one.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Super cool. It sounds like you're really have built your brand and continually are growing. And that's what's important. You know, when I
Yeah.
first started speaking, it was very interesting to have to build up that brand and then
Hmm.
rebrand and really figure out how you can actually serve. And we finally figured out, you know, tell your story. And that's what's important. It's helping people tell their stories. So we have a course called Legacy Camp where we help people tell their story through book publishing, public speaking, and creating courses and content of their own.
Awesome.
And, you know, podcasting is something that I would love to add to that, but I've got other resources that I guide people to. So, Gordon, it
Sure.
sounds like you would be a great resource for that for some of my clients. I love
Love to.
that.
Love to.
I love it. I love it. So tell me something fun outside of the podcasting that you or your wife do to alleviate stress, to just go out and have a good time.
You know, it's interesting because I've somehow managed to turn my fun into my job and career to a certain extent. So, you know, I have always been very passionate about live theater, musical theater in particular, and you know, the Wicked Part One movie is out in theaters right now, and it's doing phenomenally well. Well, my wife and I, bonded over the soundtrack to Wicked 20 years ago on our second date. We were going to the
Oh,
movies. We had some time to kill. We went into a record store. You remember record stores?
I mean, kind of. I do remember record stores, but
Yeah.
there's
Anyway,
back then for me.
and this particular, what was it? It was uh, Tower Records store or something like that. They had listening stations, and I had just heard the song "Popular" from Wicked, and so I brought her in. I said, "You're going to love this," and I put the headphones on her and I played "Popular," and that was the beginning of a beautiful relationship. And we're
Oh,
married now 20 years this year.
so do you guys still go into
Um,
listening pods
so
together?
yeah, musical theater really is the um, at the root, and we even themed our wedding around musical theater. You know, so we're geeks about that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I spent 13 years in Los Angeles pursuing acting. So do you do acting? Have you
Oh
also participated? Yes, okay. Do you sing?
no, I am not a performer in the sense of a stage performer. I've always been a behind the scenes guy. When I was doing theater as a kid, it was always the sound technician, stuff like that. I only sort of discovered this love of my own voice, I guess you could call it, as I started doing podcasting. And but I've never and on camera and stuff. But that's all relatively new. I'm not interested in learning lines and doing stage performance or being in a movie or I've done a little cameo part here and there, but no, that's not really where I want to go.
Love it. So I know that we're coming to a close here pretty soon, and
Yeah,
I love our conversation. You are a cool guy. I look forward to
thanks.
meeting you in person here next month.
Yeah,
Wow, next month already.
about a month away. Yeah.
Yeah, by the time this is out, though, we had already we'll already have been met. But it's very interesting how you know you record and then all of a sudden it's 20 years later, right?
Hmm.
Blink an eye and it's 20 years later. So for our audience, your voice is making an impact. I would love for you to give some last words of advice and tell the audience how they can reach you.
Okay. My last word of advice is a slogan that was adopted by a famous sports shoe company. Just do it. If you've got something in you that you need to get out, you want to say, you want to share with the world, just do it. Don't let fear, apprehension, doubt, don't let that get in your way. You have something important to say. It's important. that may, I mean, if it's even if it's not important, get out there and say it. You may be surprised that it resonates for people. And honestly, if you have an impact on one single person, then that's my definition of success.
Yeah.
Change one person's life for the better in just a little way, that's big success. So, um, yeah, I think that's my parting word of advice. And folks can find me. Fortunately, I'm blessed. I have a name that is easy to remember, Firemark. If you go looking for Gordon Firemark on the web, I'm the only one out there. So, firemark.com or gordonfiremark.com or thepodcastlawyer.com, all of those will work. And find me on YouTube and other social media as G Firemark.
Oh, that's amazing. And I love it that you are so individual and unique with your name. And I get it because my last name's Jewsbury. So just like you, I'm the only one on there too. So thank you so much, Gordon. You are amazing. And ladies and gentlemen, this is Voices of Impact.